Welcome back to Mia Horror Stories. Tonight's tale, my wife has been standing in the corner for 13 hours, facing the wall is best experienced in the dark, which is why the screen will stay black. No distractions, no flashing images, just you, your imagination, and the story. So sit back, relax, and listen all the way to the end, if you dare. The first time I looked at the clock and did the math, I did it wrong on purpose. Not like I was trying to trick anyone, just if I kept it in smaller numbers, it didn't sound as insane. 3 hours, 4, maybe 5. But the minute hand kept walking in its smooth little loop, and the digital display on the oven stayed rude and exact. 9:17 p.m. She'd been standing there since 8:03 this morning. I knew because I'd checked the security camera log on my phone like some guy trying to catch a raccoon in his trash cans. Except this wasn't a raccoon. This was my wife. Her nose was almost to the paint. Not touching. Close enough that her breath left a faint fog on the matte eggshell, the kind that disappears if you blink. She stood in the corner of our dining room, facing the wall, hands down at her sides, shoulders set like she was holding a heavy grocery bag in each fist. There were still things about it that were normal if you squinted. Her socks matched. She was wearing the old gray sweatshirt from a marathon she never ran, hair up in the messy twist she did when she was about to clean or cook. The Spotify speaker on the counter had timed out hours ago, so the apartment had settled into the noises we usually never listened to on purpose. The radiator ticking like it was cooling itself down in slow motion, a neighbor's TV muffled through drywall, an ambulance far off and then gone. And she was breathing. I could see it in the small rise and fall between her shoulder blades. I set my keys down as quietly as if she might be sleeping. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice gentle because that's what you do when something's wrong, but it still has an explanation. "I'm home." No movement. I took my shoes off by the door and lined them up like I always did. One small habit I pretended was for cleanliness, but was really for control. My tie felt too tight even though I'd loosened it in the elevator. I pulled it off anyway, then realized my hands were shaking a little, and I shoved the tie into my coat pocket like it was contraband. I walked around the back of the couch so I could see her profile without getting in her line of sight. There was something in me that didn't want to step between her and the wall. It felt like stepping between someone and a cliff edge. "Lena," I tried again. "Honey," still nothing. I did the most normal thing my brain could find. I made a joke, half under my breath. "Okay, if this is one of those mindfulness things, I support it, but you're scaring me." The joke had nowhere to land. It just fell into the room and sat there. I opened the fridge with my free hand, like muscle memory could carry me. Cold air hit my face. Our grocery list was still taped inside the door with her tidy looping handwriting. Milk, eggs, coffee, bananas. The word bananas had 2 question marks next to it, like she knew I'd forget. I closed the fridge and stood there holding the handle a second longer than needed. The magnets clicked softly. She didn't flinch. A small, undeniable break from normalcy. That was what my old therapist would have called it if this were a session and not my actual life. The kind of thing that's off, but still, technically, within the bounds of human behavior. People freeze. People get overwhelmed. People do weird stuff when they're stressed. We'd been stressed lately. Not in the dramatic way people talk about over dinner. In the slow, grinding way of mortgage rates and work emails, and a kitchen faucet that never stopped dripping no matter how many YouTube tutorials I watched. And there was me. I'm Adam Mercer, 34, male, and I work in IT compliance for a medical device company in Cambridge. It's the kind of job that turns your brain into a checklist. The kind of job where you can convince yourself that if you just follow enough steps in the correct order, nothing bad will happen. My private fear, the one I didn't say out loud even to myself most days, was that the moment something truly unpredictable happened, I'd be useless. That I'd stand there making lists while the house burned down. I pulled my phone out. The lock screen showed 2 missed calls from my sister and 1 text from Lena. The text was from 8:19 a.m. Can you pick up oat milk after work? Also, don't freak out. That second line had been added 2 minutes later. I stared at it until the words stopped looking like words. Then I looked at Lena, still standing in her corner like a punishment. I tapped her name in my call log and hit dial, even though she was 10 feet away. The phone rang on the counter behind her because her phone was there, face down, next to a ceramic mug that had gone cold. The screen lit up with my face as the caller ID photo. It rang twice, 3 times, then stopped. She didn't react. Not even a micro turn of the head. Okay, I said louder now, irritation flaring up because fear likes to dress up as anger. Lena, please talk to me. I moved closer. The dining room table was half set like she'd started lunch and then walked away. A plate with the crust of a sandwich. A butter knife with peanut butter dried dark along one side. The smell was faintly sweet and stale. Her stance was precise. Feet hip-width apart. Weight evenly distributed, not swaying. If she'd been sleepwalking, she would have shifted. If she was messing with me, there would have been some tell, a twitch of amusement, a suppressed breath. Lena, I said, and I reached out carefully like I was approaching a dog I didn't know. My fingertips touched her sweatshirt sleeve. Her skin under the fabric was warm. Alive. She didn't jerk away. She didn't lean into it. I slid my hand down to her wrist, checking for a pulse like I'd seen on TV. It was there, steady and unhurried. Too steady for how fast mine was beating. Hey, I whispered, closer now. What's going on? Her hair smelled like shampoo and the faint sourness of old sweat. I caught the edge of something else, too metallic, like pennies. It made my stomach tilt. I stepped around until I was beside her, not in her direct line, and crouched so I could see her face. Her eyes were open, not wide, not rolled back. Open like she was staring at something important, but her focus was fixed on the blank wall 3 inches from her nose. Her pupils looked normal in the dim overhead light. She blinked once, slow, dry. Her lips were slightly parted, as if she'd been about to speak, and then forgot how. A ridiculous thought came, sharp and immediate. Maybe she'd had a stroke. Maybe she'd hit her head. Maybe she'd taken something by accident, sleep meds, allergy pills, anything. We had a cabinet full of little orange bottles with instructions nobody read. I tried to get her attention with something ordinary. Lena, I said soft. It's me. Adam, I'm home. Can you look at me? I snapped my fingers once, right near her ear, then immediately regretted it. The sound in the quiet room felt violent. She didn't startle. I went to the kitchen drawer for the flashlight we kept for blackouts. My hands fumbled. The flashlight clattered against the silverware tray. Still, she stayed perfectly still, staring at paint. I shone the light gently across her face. No obvious droop, no unevenness. Her gaze didn't track. Beam reflected off her irises like glass. I turned the flashlight off and set it down carefully, as if noise might break something. The rational part of my brain started building an explanation like a scaffold: panic attack, dissociation, catatonia, some kind of stress response, a mental health crisis, something medical, something with a protocol. I made myself breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth, smelled dish soap, smelled peanut butter, smelled that faint metallic note again. My phone buzzed. Another message. From my sister, Maya Mercer, 31, female. Call me ASAP. Did Lena answer you? I stared at the screen. Maya wasn't the dramatic type. She worked as a paramedic in Somerville. Her texts were usually blunt and full of abbreviations. For her to write ASAP meant something. I typed back with my thumbs hovering like they didn't know how to be human. I'm home. She's here. She's standing in the corner, not responding. 3 dots appeared instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again. Adam, don't touch anything else. Is she breathing? Is she bleeding? Call 911. Now, I looked up at Lena, at the way her shoulders held themselves so deliberately, the way her fingers were curled just slightly, like she'd been gripping something earlier. On the floor near the baseboard, half under the chair, there was a thin, clear plastic strip I hadn't noticed at first, like packaging from a new appliance, or something torn off quickly. It caught the light when I shifted, and for a second, it looked almost like a filament. My mouth went dry. I could call 911. That was the obvious move. But the thought of uniformed strangers in our apartment, of Lena standing like this while someone asked her name and got nothing back, made heat spread up the back of my neck. Shame, irrational and immediate. The same shame that makes you hide messes before company comes over. Or I could do what I always did, try to handle it myself first. Find the reason, fix it quietly, solve it like a system error. My finger hovered over the call button. I glanced at Lena's phone on the counter, face down like it was hiding. I glanced at the medicine cabinet. I glanced at the front door, still unlocked behind me. Lena blinked again, slow, deliberate, without turning away from the wall. In the tiny pause after her blink, the apartment felt like it was waiting for my decision. I stood there with my phone in my hand and realized the choice wasn't between embarrassment and calm. It was between getting help and pretending I still had control. And I didn't know which one would make things worse. I called 911. I didn't do it dramatically. No shaking hand, no whispered prayer. I just pressed the button like I was accepting a calendar invite I didn't want to attend. The dispatcher answered on the second ring, and I gave her our address and said my wife wasn't responding and had been standing in one place for hours. I heard myself minimizing it even as I spoke, sanding the edges off the words so they wouldn't cut me. Is she conscious? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I said. Her eyes are open. She's breathing. Is she responding to verbal stimuli? No. Is she standing unassisted? Yes. There was a pause, a soft clack of keys. I need you to ensure the scene is safe. Are there any strong odors, gas, chemicals? I hesitated, then thought of the smell. There's something faint, kind of metallic. Okay, she said, tone sharpening just a notch. Do you have a carbon monoxide detector? Yes, in the hallway. Is it alarming? I looked toward the hallway. The detector's small green light was steady. No sound, no flashing red. No, I said, it's not going off. Sir, I want you to open a window if you can safely do so. Not move your wife unless she's in immediate danger. Paramedics are en route. I thanked her, because politeness is my reflex even when my house feels wrong, and hung up. I went to the nearest window and cracked it open. Cold air slid in, smelling like wet pavement and exhaust. The radiator clicked louder, offended. Lena didn't move. My phone buzzed again. Maya was calling this time. "I'm 5 minutes away," she said as soon as I answered. "I was already headed in your direction." "How did you? Your address is still in my phone," she said. "Listen to me. Has she fallen? Any injuries?" "No," I said. "She's just standing there. Maya, she's been like this all day." "Any meds missing? Anything unusual in the apartment?" I thought of the plastic strip on the floor. "There's something on the ground, like packaging. And this smell." "Do not touch it," she said, sharp enough that it snapped something in my chest. "Adam, if there's any chance this is environmental, you need to get yourself safe too." "I'm fine," I said automatically, because that's what I always said. "I feel fine." "That doesn't mean anything," she said. "Co-poisoning can mess with perception. You can feel normal right up until you're not." I looked at Lena again, at the steadiness of her, the way her breathing hadn't changed even when I opened the window. The detector didn't go off. "Detectors fail," Maya said. "Batteries die. Sensors drift." "When was the last time you tested it?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. I couldn't remember. It had been months, maybe longer. Maya exhaled hard. "Okay, I'm coming in hot. If she collapses, call me back. If you feel dizzy, lightheaded, anything, you get out." I hung up and realized my heart was pounding hard enough that it made my vision pulse slightly at the edges. I blamed adrenaline. It was easier than considering the alternative. I went back to Lena. The window had shifted the air in the room, stirring that metallic note until it was stronger, less ambiguous. It reminded me of the inside of a toolbox left out in the rain. "Help is coming," I told her, more for myself than for her. "You just have to hang on." Her jaw moved, just a fraction, enough that I noticed. "Lena," I leaned in, heart jumping. "Can you hear me?" Her lips parted a little more. A sound came out, not a word, a breath forced through teeth. It sounded like effort. I crouched in front of her again, trying to catch her eye without getting directly in her face. Her pupils looked off, not uneven, but sluggish. When she blinked, it was delayed, like her body was waiting for permission. "Okay," I said, voice shaking despite my best effort. "Okay, that's good. That's something." I glanced toward the hallway. The co-detector still glowed green, smug, and useless. The sirens arrived sooner than I expected. Red and blue light flashed against the walls, stuttering through the apartment like a bad edit. There was a knock, loud, authoritative. I opened the door to 2 paramedics and a firefighter, all efficient motion and clipped questions. They filled the apartment with the smell of cold air and rubber gloves. They assessed Lena where she stood. One of the paramedics, a woman with a tight braid and tired eyes, checked her vitals. "Pulse is steady," she said. "BP's elevated, but not critical." The firefighter glanced around. "You said metallic smell." "Yes," I said, "faint." He reached down and picked up the clear plastic strip with gloved fingers. He frowned. "This looks like part of a tamper seal, industrial." My stomach dropped. "From what?" "Hard to say," he said. "Could be from a chemical container, cleaning product, solvent." "Do you have any new appliances?" the paramedic asked me. "Space heaters, humidifiers. Anything plugged in that wasn't before." I shook my head, then stopped. "We got a new air purifier last week. From a friend. It's in the bedroom." The firefighter's head snapped up. "Turn it off. Now." I ran. The purifier was humming softly, blue light steady, like it had done its job too well. I unplugged it and the hum died, leaving a thick quiet behind. When I came back, Maya was there, pushing past the responders with a badge flashed so fast it was more gesture than proof. She took one look at Lena and swore under her breath. "Is it?" I asked. "What do you think it is?" "Could be exposure," she said. "Could be something she inhaled. Could be intentional or accidental. We don't know yet." Intentional, the word landed wrong. "No, she wouldn't," Maya met my eyes. "I'm not saying she tried to hurt herself. I'm saying people do things they don't fully understand when they're trying to fix a problem." The paramedics moved to get Lena onto a stretcher. When they tried to guide her away from the wall, she resisted. Not violently. Planted her feet harder, muscles locking. Her breathing spiked, shallow and fast. A low sound came from her throat, like panic trying to stay contained. "Hey," I said quickly. "Hey, it's okay. They're here to help." She turned her head a fraction, just enough that I could see the corner of her eye. For the first time since I'd come home, her gaze broke from the wall. She looked at me. There was fear there, raw and unfiltered, and something else, certainty, like she was holding onto a rule I didn't know. Her lips moved. This time, the sound that came out was almost a word. "Don't," she whispered. The paramedic paused. "Sir," she said to me, "we need to move her." "If this is toxic exposure, time matters," I nodded, even as my chest tightened. "I know." They counted down together, coordinated. On 3, they pulled. Something clattered to the floor as Lena was finally turned away from the wall, a small object that had been hidden behind her foot. A slim, cracked vial. Empty. The label was partially torn, but I could make out enough. Industrial use only. The firefighter swore. Maya grabbed my arm. "Adam," she said urgently, "we need to evacuate the building. Now." As they lifted Lena onto the stretcher, her fingers tightened around my sleeve with surprising strength. Her nails dug in, grounding me, anchoring me to her fear. "I was fixing it," she said hoarsely, eyes locked on mine. "I didn't want you to worry." And the paramedics wheeled her away, and the apartment suddenly felt much, much smaller. They moved fast once the vial hit the floor. The firefighter, broad-shouldered, soot-smudged even in clean gear, stepped into the hallway and called something into his radio that I couldn't quite hear over the building's sudden, anxious noise. Doors cracking open. A dog barking. Someone on the 3rd floor asking, too loudly, if there was a fire. Maya kept one hand on my elbow like I might drift. "Stay with me," she said low. "I am," I said, but my voice sounded far away, like it belonged to the apartment we were leaving. The stretcher rolled out first. Lena lay on her back now, straps across her chest and thighs, her eyes half-lidded, but still open. She looked smaller, less like a person who'd been holding a corner with sheer will, and more like someone who'd been quietly drowning in the same room I'd eaten breakfast in yesterday. As the paramedics pivoted the stretcher through the doorframe, Lena's head turned slightly. Her gaze snagged on the dining room corner as if it had a magnet in it. The wall, the blank paint. She didn't fight the straps, but her throat made that tight, contained sound again. "Lena," I said, stepping close, because my body still believed proximity could fix things. "I'm right here." One of the paramedics, Erin Walsh, 29, female, shot me a look that was firm, but not unkind. "Sir, you can follow in your own car. We need space." "I don't have a car," I said stupidly. Then you'll follow later," Maya cut in. "I'll go with her, you." Her eyes moved over me like a scan. You need to get outside. Fresh air, now. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I was fine. I wanted to do the thing I always do, which is make myself useful by controlling details. But the hallway had started to tilt in a way I couldn't blame entirely on adrenaline. The building's corridor ran straight from our unit to the elevator, beige carpet worn thin down the center. I'd walked it 1,000 times. Tonight it felt narrower, like it was squeezing us out. At the far end, the exit sign glowed a too bright red, the color of an appliance light in a dark kitchen. Adam, Maya said, sharper, and I realized I'd stopped moving. Stairs. Elevator's a bad idea if this is airborne. We took the stairs. Concrete, cold, smelling faintly like mop water, and someone's old cigarette smoke from years ago baked into the paint. Halfway down, my throat tightened, and I had to swallow hard, the way you do when you're trying not to cough in a movie theater. On the landing between the second and first floors, a door slammed open, and a man in socks leaned out, wild-eyed. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Possible chemical exposure," Aaron called up from below without slowing. "Evacuate. Leave everything. Do not re-enter." The man blinked, as if his brain had tried to refuse that sentence. "Chemical, like move," a firefighter barked, and the man jerked back like he'd been yanked by a leash. Outside, the air hit like a slap. January cold, wet, and honest. The street in front of our building was crowded with apparatus, ambulance engine, a white SUV with blinking amber lights. Red and blue strobed against the brownstone facades across the street, turning windows into blinking eyes. The sidewalk filled with people in pajama pants and slippers, hugging themselves. Someone had wrapped a blanket around a toddler. A woman with a terrier clutched the leash like it was a lifeline. The terrier kept trying to go back inside, confused and furious. Maya guided me to the curb. "Sit," she ordered. "I'm not. Sit." I sat on the cold edge of the concrete planter by the front steps. My hands were numb already, but sweat clung to my lower back. My phone felt slick. Maya crouched in front of me, her paramedic comm snapping into place like a helmet. "Listen, I'm going with her to the ER. You are not going back in there." "I need her phone," I said immediately. "It's on the counter, her medical history contacts. You can get it later," Maya said. "What if they need to know what she took?" The words came out too loud. A few neighbors glanced over. I lowered my voice. "What if there's a message on it? Something she was trying to tell me." Maya's mouth tightened. "Then you tell Aaron, and they can collect it safely." They were already moving into procedure. A firefighter unspooled yellow tape and blocked off the front door. Another brought out a plastic bin and started laying out supplies on the sidewalk: gloves, masks, a little handheld device with a screen and a wand. The kind of thing you see in airport security videos. A police cruiser pulled up and parked double. An officer got out, pulling his hat low against the cold. Officer Luca Morty, 42, male, approached with a notepad, the kind of face that looked like it had seen enough to stop expecting neat explanations. "Sir, you live in Unit 2B. "Yes," I said, "that's us." "Your wife is the patient?" he asked. "Yes." He asked for my name, date of birth, the basics, while the ambulance doors closed and Lena disappeared into the vehicle with Maya following. The siren kicked on and then faded down the street toward Massachusetts Ave, the sound shrinking until it became just another city noise. I sat there and felt the first real weight of the thing. She was gone, and I was still here, and the apartment, our home, was now a hazard. Officer Morty kept talking. Any recent renovations, pesticides, anything you store that could be dangerous. We don't keep anything, I said. Just normal stuff. Reason your wife would have industrial use only chemicals, he asked, glancing down at his notes. No, I said too fast, and Maya's earlier words cut through my denial. People do things they don't fully understand when they're trying to fix a problem. My mind spiraled toward the air purifier, the gift, the friend. Wait, I said, there was a purifier. Someone gave it to us. Morty's eyes sharpened. Who? My coworker, I said. Jonas. He said his sister didn't need it. Full name. Jonas, I stalled, because I realized I didn't know his last name off the top of my head the way you think you do, until you have to say it to a cop. Keller, Jonas Keller. Morty wrote it down. Maya's absence was a physical thing now, a missing support beam. Without her, my thoughts didn't have a guardrail. I tried the first attempt at solving something I called Jonas. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, call me. Emergency. No reply. I opened the app for the security camera, our cheap little indoor cam that pointed at the front door, because Lena hated the feeling of people walking past in the hallway. The feed loaded, lagged, then showed the empty entryway inside our unit, tinted in grayscale night vision, even though it was still early. The camera had switched modes because the lights inside were off now. I scrolled back through the timeline. 8:03 a.m. motion detected in the dining room. I tapped it. The clip buffered. And then the screen froze and a message popped up. Connection lost. Of course, the one time I needed technology to behave like the brochure, it didn't. I felt my throat tighten with anger that wasn't really anger. A procedural failure, a tiny betrayal. I stood up too quickly and had to grab the edge of the planter. The world swam for a second. The cold air tasted sharp. Officer Morty watched me. You okay? Yeah, I lied. A firefighter in a different jacket, white helmet, more authority, walked over to Morty and spoke quietly. I caught only fragments. Multiple units, precaution, ventilation. Hazmat en route. Hazmat. The word didn't belong on our street. A new vehicle arrived, boxy and white, and a technician stepped out wearing a respirator slung around his neck like a necklace. Calvin Rausch, 38, male, introduced himself briskly and held up the handheld detector. We're going to do a quick assessment. If there's airborne contamination, nobody goes back inside. I need something from the apartment, I said immediately, voice cracking. Her phone. It's right inside the door. Calvin didn't even look at me. He was scanning the air near the entrance, the wand moving slowly as if he was tasting invisible soup. Not your call, he said. The device beeped once. Then again. Not a shriek, not a dramatic alarm. Just a steady, patient beep that made my stomach drop because it sounded like confirmation. Calvin turned slightly. We're getting readings, he said to Morty. Not sure what yet. Morty's head snapped up. Readings of what? VOCs at least, Calvin said. Possibly something else. We need to identify. Until then, treat it as hazardous. My mind tried to keep up, failed, and then did what it always does, searched for a loophole. The second attempt came out of my mouth before I could stop it. What if I just run in? 10 seconds, grab the phone. I'll hold my breath. Maya would have slapped me. Lena would have rolled her eyes. A normal Lena would have. Calvin finally looked at me, and his expression wasn't sympathy. It was disgusted disbelief, like he'd seen this movie too many times. That's not how lungs work, he said. And if you contaminate yourself, we've got 2 patients. I can't just stand here, I said, and I hated how needy it sounded. Morty's voice cut in. Sir, you need to stay behind the tape. I stared at the front steps, the door, the gap between me and the counter where Lena's phone was lying face down. 10 feet, maybe 12. The distance felt like a dare. People around us murmured, a low ripple. Someone asked if it was gas. Someone else said they'd smelled something weird earlier too. A man held his phone up, filming, because of course he did. My private fear, the one about being useless when things got unpredictable, rose up and took control of my body. I couldn't fix Lena's condition from the sidewalk. I couldn't make Jonah's pick up. I couldn't force the camera to connect. The only thing I could do was a simple physical action with a clear goal. Get the phone. Before anyone could stop me, I ducked under the tape. Adam, Morty barked. Hands reached for my jacket, but I twisted away with a suddenness that surprised even me. I bounded up the steps, fumbled the key like my fingers belonged to someone else, and shoved the door open. The apartment air hit me immediately. It was warmer inside, stale, and the metallic smell was stronger now that I knew to look for it. Not dramatic, not choking, just wrong, like pennies and damp drywall. I moved fast, straight through the entryway into the kitchen, 5 steps, then the turn left where the counter began. Lena's phone was exactly where I remembered, still face down. I grabbed it. Behind me, the front door swung shut with a heavy, final sound. And from the hallway outside, I heard Calvin's voice muffled through the door saying, "Seal it, he's inside." Tape ripped. Another strip, more layers. My pulse jumped. I rushed to the door and yanked the handle. It didn't budge. Not locked by a key. Held by pressure, tape, and procedure. I pressed my forehead against the wood for a second, breathing hard, and realized the point of no return wasn't a dramatic explosion or a scream. It was the soft, methodical sound of them making the outside safe by trapping me on the inside. The tape ripping outside the door wasn't frantic. That was the worst part. It was calm, methodical, like wrapping a package. "Hey," I yelled, slamming my palm against the wood. "You can't, I'm inside." My voice came back at me, swallowed by the apartment. The hallway side stayed muffled, busy. Someone said my name once, Morty, I thought, but it was followed by Calvin's flat, professional tone. "Sir, stay put. Don't touch anything. We'll get you out. Stay put." As if this were a delayed train, I backed away from the door with Lena's phone in my hand and tried to slow my breathing the way my therapist had taught me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The air tasted like warm pennies, not choking, not dramatic, just wrong, a sharpness that sat behind my tongue. My eyes watered in a way that didn't feel like crying, more like my body trying to rinse itself. I moved on instinct toward the open window in the living room and pulled it up the rest of the way. Cold air rushed in, slapping the curtains against the sill. For a moment, it helped. Then my head swam. I grabbed the back of the couch and held on until the room stopped tilting. Okay, checklist. Do something useful. Do anything. I looked at Lena's phone. Face ID failed, of course it did, so I held it up to her face out of habit, then caught myself. She was already halfway to the ER. I typed her passcode without thinking, the same 4 digits we'd used since we moved in together, like a stupid shared secret. The home screen opened. 5 new notifications bloomed at once, like the phone had been holding its breath. A reminder, return purifier Jonas, set for today, 11:00 a.m. My stomach tightened. I opened messages and searched Jonah's. The thread was longer than I expected. JONAS, dropping the purifier off. It's intense. Lena, intense how? JONAS, it's one of those air sanitizer units. My sister used it in a storage room. Lena, like a normal HEPA. JONAS, not exactly. Read the manual PLS. Don't run it with people in the room. Lena, JONAS, ozone thing. Smells like metal after storms. You'll know. JONAS. Seriously, only run it in empty room for short cycles. My throat went tight as if the words themselves had weight. Metal after storms. The smell. I felt a sudden, furious clarity that made my hands shake. The purifier in the bedroom. The blue light. The hum. Lena trying to fix something, probably our stale winter air. The headaches we'd both been blaming on screens and stress. And she'd done it alone, without telling me, because she didn't want me to worry. And because I always worried in lists. I heard a thump somewhere deep in the building and spun, heart kicking. For half a second, my brain served up something irrational, someone else in here, moving in the dark, until the radiator gave a louder ping, and the upstairs neighbor's music resumed through the ceiling. Bass, a muffled laugh, normal life continuing above a sealed hazard. Misdirection. My brain was desperate for monsters with faces. This threat didn't have one. I moved fast, keeping to the edges of the room like that mattered. Bedroom door on the right off the hall, past the bathroom. I pulled my sweatshirt up over my mouth and nose like it was a mask, and hated how useless it probably was. The purifier sat on Lena's side of the bed, still and innocent with its glossy plastic shell. I'd unplugged it earlier, but now the blue indicator was off, and in the dim light, it looked like any other appliance you'd buy online at 2 a.m. I leaned close and smelled the vent. Metal. I coughed once, sharp, and it scraped my throat as if it had edges. On the floor beside the purifier was the manual Jonas had mentioned. Lena had actually opened it. She de-underlined something with a pen so hard the paper tore slightly. I forced myself to focus, eyes blurring a little. Warning, ozone generation. Do not operate in occupied SPACES. There was more timers, recommended square footage, ventilation guidelines, but my gaze caught on the line she'd marked twice. If odor persists, discontinue use immediately and ventilate. I swallowed. My mouth tasted sour now. Okay, source identified. Step 2, get this information to the people who needed it. I thumbed Maya's number and hit call. It rang once, twice. Then she picked up, breathless. Adam, where are you? In the apartment, I said, and my voice cracked. They sealed the door. Maya, it's the purifier. Jonas told Lena it's an ozone unit. She ran it in here. There was a pause. Then Maya's voice went tight with anger that had fear underneath it. How long was it running? I don't know, I said, but she'd been standing in the corner since 8. The smell, it's like metal, Maya finished. Okay, I'm telling the ER right now. Ozone exposure can mess up airways. They'll treat supportively oxygen bronchodilators monitor. Do you feel short of breath? I tried to answer and realized I was breathing shallow. My chest felt not painful, just slightly too tight, like my ribs were annoyed with me. A little, I admitted. Adam, you need out, Maya said. Now. Trying, I said, and the helplessness in my voice made me want to punch a wall. The door's taped. What do I do? Windows, Maya said immediately. Get as much ventilation as you can and stay away from the unit. I was already doing that. I was also already dizzy. Then another detail punched through: the vial, the tamper seal. Industrial use only. Ozone explained the smell and the purifier. It didn't fully explain the vial hidden behind Lena's foot. That felt like another layer. Another mistake. Another thing she'd tried. I stumbled back into the dining room, following the memory of where it had clattered. The corner looked strangely bare without her there. Just the meeting of two walls, baseboards scuffed from chairs, a faint, darker oval on the paint where her breath had been all day. On the floor, the cracked vial sat where it had fallen. I picked it up with my sleeve, careful not to touch it directly, and squinted at the torn label. It wasn't a mystery chemical with a cool name. It was worse. Ozone neutralizer, industrial use only. Do not inhale. Use only with proper ventilation. A neutralizer. So she'd smelled the metal, realized something was wrong. And instead of calling me, instead of turning it off and leaving, she tried to fix it with the kind of product meant for warehouses and remediation crews. Because that's what people do when they're trying to make a problem disappear before the person they love comes home and sees it. I lowered myself into a chair for half a second, fighting nausea. My hands tingled. My thoughts were starting to slip like soap in the bath. No plot armor, no magic clarity, just a failing body. Okay, immediate goal: reduce exposure and get out without becoming a bigger problem. I stood up and moved again, faster now because I could feel time narrowing. I pulled every window open: living room, bedroom, even the tiny bathroom one over the tub. Cold air poured through the apartment, turning it into a wind tunnel that made papers flutter and the curtains slap. I turned on the bathroom fan, the only exhaust we had, and left the purifier far behind me. Then I went to the bedroom window. We had a rear fire escape. Narrow metal steps down to a fenced alley behind the building, where trash bins waited like silent witnesses. I'd used it once during a fire drill and hated how exposed it felt. I climbed out anyway. The metal was slick with winter damp. My palms slipped. My foot found the first rung, then the next. I kept Lena's phone in my pocket like it was a weapon. Halfway down, my right shoe slid on a rung, and my knee slammed into the rail. White pain shot up my leg. I bit down hard enough my jaw clicked, kept moving. When my feet hit the alley, the cold air felt like a clean blade. I stood there bent over, hands on my thighs, dragging breath into my lungs. It hurt a little now, each inhale a scratch. Above me, on the fire escape landing, someone shouted my name. Morty's voice. Calvin's. I couldn't tell. I looked up and raised one hand so they could see I was out. The conflict, at least the immediate one, shifted. The apartment was ventilating. The source was off. Hazmat could do their work without worrying about rescuing a stubborn idiot who'd made himself into a second incident. But the cost was already in my body. My chest tight, my knee throbbing, my eyes burning as if I'd stared into wind for too long. And in my head, a new realization settled like grit. Lena hadn't been standing in that corner for 13 hours because of a ghost. She'd been standing there because she'd been trying to solve a problem alone until her brain and body simply stopped cooperating. And I'd been the kind of man she didn't want to worry. That thought didn't leave room for relief. It just made the cold feel sharper. They kept Lena overnight. That part was non-negotiable. Observation, oxygen, nebulizers that made her cough and swear softly into a paper mask. Her voice was hoarse when I finally heard it, and the sound of it raspy but unmistakably hers, hit me harder than any diagnosis. They gave me a chair in the corner of the ER room and a paper bracelet, even though I wasn't admitted. For tracking, the nurse said, like that made sense. My knee had been wrapped and iced. My lungs were irritated but clear, which felt like a technical way of saying I'd gotten lucky without earning it. Maya came in after shift change, hair down, jacket unzipped. The adrenaline burned off her face, so she looked like my sister again, and not a uniform. She hugged me once hard, then let go like she was checking a box. "Jonas Keller's HR is calling you tomorrow," she said quietly. Hospital filed a report. Fire marshal too. "Am I in trouble?" I asked. She gave me a look. "No, but he might be. That unit shouldn't have been circulating without documentation." And she nodded toward Lena, who was asleep now, chest rising under the thin blanket. She made a mistake trying to correct it. Not a crime, a mistake. I nodded, because nodding was easier than saying anything else. When Lena woke, it was slow. She came back to herself in pieces. First her eyes, focusing on the IV pole like it was a puzzle she didn't remember starting. Then her hands, testing the blanket edge. Then me. She stared at my face for a long second, and the fear there was quieter than it had been in the apartment. Quieter, but deeper. "I messed up," she said, voice barely louder than the oxygen hissing. "You scared me," I said, because it was true, and because it didn't accuse. I didn't know what was happening. She nodded, a tiny movement that cost her. I smelled it, the metal. Remembered what Jonas said, and I thought, if I just neutralize it, it'll be fine before you get home. Her eyes closed for a beat. Then my head felt thick, like I was underwater. I knew I should leave, but I didn't want to track it through the apartment. I didn't want to make it worse. "And the corner?" I asked. She opened her eyes again and looked at the ceiling. I needed something solid, something that wouldn't move. I thought if I stayed still, it would pass. It was the most Lena answer possible, practical to the point of self-erasure. The doctors explained ozone exposure the way doctors explain things, calmly, with diagrams, with percentages that tried to put edges around uncertainty. Her lungs would likely recover fully. My symptoms should resolve in days. The apartment would need professional remediation. Insurance would argue about it. Life would resume. A social worker asked us questions, with a pen poised like a small weapon. A police officer followed up with a statement that sounded gentler than it felt. We answered. We didn't lie. There was nothing to gain from that. 2 days later, we went home. The building smelled like cleaner and cold air. Fans whirred in our unit, industrial and loud, chewing at the last of whatever had lingered. The dining room corner looked like it always had. No stain, no mark, just paint. We stood in the doorway for a moment, not touching anything. "I'll get the windows," I said. "I'll sit," Lena said, and she did, carefully, on the couch. She watched me move around the apartment like she was relearning a place she thought she knew. I opened windows. I checked the detector and replaced the batteries, even though the new remediation report said the sensors were fine. I unplugged the purifier and sealed it in a contractor bag with tape until the bag looked like a warning itself. Jonas texted an apology that was long and panicked and too late. Char sent an email full of words like procedure and review. The fire marshal posted a notice that felt like a scar you couldn't see from the street. At night, the apartment sounded almost normal. Radiator ticking, distant traffic, the neighbor's TV. We didn't sleep well. The first night, Lena woke up gasping and sat straight up. eyes searching the dark for a corner that wasn't there. I turned on a lamp. I said her name. She took the inhaler they'd given her and waited for her breathing to smooth. We didn't talk about it until morning. In the morning, she stood at the kitchen counter and stared at the wall for half a second too long. Then she shook her head like she was shaking off water. "I should have called you," she said. "I wanted to say I should have noticed. I wanted to say you didn't have to protect me. I wanted to say I don't need control to care. Instead, I said, we'll make a rule." She raised an eyebrow. "No fixing alone," I said. "No quiet corrections. If something smells wrong, looks wrong, feels wrong, we stop. We leave, we call." She nodded. "Deal." We taped the rule to the inside of the cabinet with the orange bottles. It looked ridiculous. It worked. Weeks passed. My knee healed to a dull ache that reminded me when the weather changed. Lena's cough faded. The building went back to complaining about parking like nothing had happened. The almost ordinary returned. But sometimes, when I came home and the apartment was quiet, I'd pause in the doorway and listen longer than necessary. I'd check the corner without meaning to. I'd smell the air like a habit I couldn't break. And once, late one evening, the detector chirped not an alarm, just a low battery warning. A single, polite beep. We both froze. I crossed the room and replaced the battery with hands that didn't shake. The green light came back on, steady. We stood there for a second longer than we needed to. Then Lena laughed, soft and surprised, and leaned into me like she was relearning where to put her weight. The apartment settled around us, normal enough to live in, normal enough to believe again.